Picture this scenario. You're sitting in your cubicle at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday, staring at your computer screen, and instead of working on that quarterly report, you're calculating something completely different. You're figuring out exactly how much money you need sitting in investments to walk into your boss's office and say those two magical words: I quit. Not because you're angry or because you hate your job, though you might, but because you've reached that specific dollar amount where your money works harder than you do. Most people think passive income is some fantasy reserved for trust fund kids or crypto millionaires who got lucky. They imagine you need millions of dollars to even think about leaving your job. But here's something that might surprise you. The actual number is probably much smaller than you think, and there's real mathematics behind exactly how much you need to achieve what financial experts call your freedom number. My name is Alex, and I've spent countless hours diving deep into the mechanics of passive income, studying the strategies that actually work, and figuring out why some people escape the 9-to-5 grind while others spend decades dreaming about it but never taking action. If you're someone who's tired of trading time for money and wants to understand the real numbers behind financial independence, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if it helps you see a clearer path to your own freedom. Now, before we dive into the specific dollar amounts that could change your life, let me ask you something. When you think about quitting your job, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Maybe it's fear about how you'll pay your bills. Perhaps it's excitement about having complete control over your schedule. Or maybe it's confusion about whether passive income is even real or just another internet marketing scheme. The truth is, passive income isn't magic, and it's definitely not passive in the beginning. But once you understand the fundamental principles and the specific thresholds that make it work, you can create a systematic plan to replace your job income with money that flows in whether you're sleeping, traveling, or binge watching Netflix. Here's what most people get wrong about passive income. They think it means making money without doing any work whatsoever. They picture themselves lying on a beach while cash magically appears in their bank account. That's not how it works, at least not initially. Real passive income requires significant upfront effort, whether that's building a business, creating content, buying rental properties, or accumulating enough investments to live off the returns. The passive part comes later, once you've done the heavy lifting and created systems that generate income without your constant involvement. Think about it this way. A farmer doesn't plant seeds and immediately expect to harvest crops the next day. There's months of watering, weeding, and maintaining before those seeds grow into something that provides ongoing value. Passive income works the same way. You plant financial seeds today, so you can harvest income tomorrow. But here's where it gets really interesting, and this is something that will probably change how you think about money entirely. There are specific dollar amounts where passive income stops being a nice bonus and starts becoming a legitimate replacement for your job. These aren't arbitrary numbers that financial gurus made up to sell courses. They're mathematical thresholds based on withdrawal rates, investment returns, and real-world living expenses. The first threshold that most people should aim for is what I call the breathing room number. This isn't enough to quit your job, but it's enough to start changing your relationship with work. For most people, this number is around $25,000 in invested assets. At a 4% withdrawal rate, which is considered conservative by most financial planners, $25,000 generates about $1,000 annually in passive income. That's roughly $83 per month. Now, $83 might not sound life-changing, but psychologically, it's huge. It's proof that your money can work for you. It's evidence that passive income isn't just a concept you read about online. It's real money hitting your account every month without you having to show up anywhere or answer to anyone. More importantly, it's the foundation for everything that comes next. People who successfully build substantial passive income almost always start by hitting smaller milestones first. They prove to themselves that the system works. Then they scale it up. The next major threshold is what I call the side hustle replacement number. This is where passive income becomes substantial enough to replace a part-time job or significant side income. For most people, this threshold is around $100,000 in invested assets. At that same $100,000 generates 4% withdrawal rate, $1,000 annually, or about $333 per month. Now we're talking about money that could cover your car payment, your grocery bill, or a significant chunk of your housing costs. This level of passive income starts to create real options in your life. Maybe you can afford to work fewer hours at your main job. Perhaps you can finally quit that weekend side hustle you've been doing for extra cash. Or maybe you can start taking more risks with your career because you know you have that monthly income cushion. But here's where most people make a critical mistake. They hit $100,000 in assets and immediately start thinking about quitting their job. They run the numbers and realize that $4,000 per year isn't nearly enough to live on, so they get discouraged and sometimes even stop investing altogether. This is backwards thinking. $100,000 isn't your finish line. It's proof that you're on the right track and that bigger numbers are absolutely achievable if you stay consistent. The real game changer, the threshold where passive income becomes a legitimate job replacement option, varies dramatically based on your lifestyle and expenses. But for most people, it falls somewhere between $400,000 and $800,000 in invested assets. Let's break this down with some real numbers that might surprise you. If you have $500,000 invested and withdraw 4% annually, that generates $20,000 in passive income. $20,000 might not sound like enough to live on, but remember, this is after-tax income if it's coming from tax-advantaged accounts or qualified dividends. $20,000 in passive income is equivalent to earning somewhere between $25,000 and $30,000 at a regular job, depending on your tax situation. That's still not enough for most people to maintain their current lifestyle, but it's getting into the realm of possibility, especially if you're willing to make some adjustments to your spending or if you have additional income sources. The sweet spot for most people is around $600,000 to $700,000 in invested assets. At $600,000, you're generating $24,000 annually in passive income. At $700,000, you're looking at $28,000 per year. These numbers start to feel more realistic as job replacement income, particularly if you've paid off your house, live in a lower cost area, or have developed skills that allow you to earn additional income on your own terms. But here's something that most financial advisors won't tell you, probably because it doesn't fit neatly into their retirement planning models. The 4% rule isn't set in stone, and depending on your age and risk tolerance, you might be able to withdraw more than 4% annually, which dramatically lowers the amount you need to achieve financial independence. If you're comfortable with a slightly higher withdrawal rate, say 5%, then $500,000 generates $25,000 annually in passive income. At 6%, which is more aggressive but not unreasonable for younger investors, $500,000 generates $30,000 per year. Suddenly, that job replacement number drops from $700,000 or $800,000 down to around $500,000, which feels much more achievable for most people. The key is understanding that passive income isn't an all-or-nothing proposition. You don't need to accumulate $1 million before you start seeing meaningful benefits. Every $25,000 you invest gets you closer to having real options and real freedom in your life. Now, let's talk about something that most people completely overlook when they're planning their escape from the 9-to-5 world. The type of passive income you choose matters just as much as the amount you accumulate. Not all passive income is created equal, and understanding the differences could save you years of frustration and potentially thousands of dollars in mistakes. There are essentially 3 categories of passive income, and each one has different requirements, different risk levels, and different timelines for becoming truly passive. The first category is what I call investment passive income. This includes dividends from stocks, interest from bonds, returns from index funds, and distributions from real estate investment trusts. This is the most predictable and arguably the most passive form of income once you've accumulated enough assets. The beautiful thing about investment passive income is that it requires zero ongoing effort from you. You buy the investments, and they generate returns based on market performance and company profits. The downside is that you need substantial amounts of capital upfront to generate meaningful income. We've already covered those numbers, but the reality is that most people will need several $100,000 before investment income alone can replace their job. The second category is business passive income, and this is where things get more interesting but also more complicated. This includes rental real estate, royalties from intellectual property, affiliate marketing income, and revenue from businesses you've built but no longer actively manage. Business passive income can potentially generate much higher returns on your initial investment, but it typically requires more work upfront and ongoing management. Take rental real estate as an example. If you buy a rental property for $200,000 with a 20% down payment, you've invested $40,000 upfront. If that property generates $500 per month in positive cash flow after all expenses, you're earning $6,000 annually on your $40,000 investment. That's a 15% return, which is significantly higher than what you'd typically expect from stock market investments. But here's the catch. That rental property isn't truly passive. You'll need to deal with tenant issues, maintenance problems, vacancy periods, and all the headaches that come with being a landlord. Some people love this and find it rewarding. Others discover they hate it and would rather stick with index funds that never call them at midnight about a broken water heater. The third category is what I call hybrid passive income. This includes things like creating online courses, building YouTube channels, writing books, or developing apps. These income sources require significant upfront effort to create, but once they're established, they can generate income for years with minimal ongoing work. The challenge with hybrid passive income is that success isn't guaranteed. You could spend months creating an online course that nobody buys, or years building a YouTube channel that never gains traction. But when it works, the returns can be extraordinary. I know people who created single online courses that generate six figures annually in passive income. That's the kind of return that could replace a high-paying job with just one successful product. Here's something crucial that most people miss when they're calculating their passive income needs. Your expenses don't stay the same once you quit your job. Some expenses go up, but many others go down. And understanding this can dramatically change how much money you actually need to achieve financial independence. On the expense reduction side, you'll save money on commuting, work clothes, eating out for lunch, and all those little costs that add up when you're working a traditional job. You might also save money on childcare if you're able to be home with your kids. These savings can easily amount to several $100s per month for many people, but some expenses might increase. You'll probably want to get your own health insurance, which can be expensive depending on where you live and your family situation. You might also find that you spend more money on hobbies, travel, or other activities once you have more free time. The key is to realistically estimate what your expenses will look like in your post-job life, not just assume they'll be the same as they are now. This brings us to something I call the geographic arbitrage advantage. Your passive income requirements can vary dramatically based on where you choose to live. $25,000 in passive income might not be enough to live comfortably in San Francisco or New York City, but it could provide a decent lifestyle in many parts of the Midwest, South, or even internationally in countries with lower costs of living. Some people use this to their advantage by building their passive income while living in higher income areas, then relocating to lower cost areas once they're ready to quit their jobs. This strategy can effectively cut your passive income requirements in half or more, which means you could achieve financial independence years earlier than you thought possible. There's also the sequence of returns risk that most people don't consider when planning their exit strategy. If you quit your job and immediately start withdrawing from your investments, and the market happens to crash in your first few years of retirement, you could seriously damage your long-term financial security. This is why many financial experts recommend having at least 1 to 2 years of expenses saved in cash before you make the leap to living off passive income. But here's where it gets really interesting from a psychological perspective. The hardest part about quitting your job isn't usually the money, it's the identity shift. Most people derive a significant portion of their self-worth and social identity from their career. When someone asks what you do and you can't point to a traditional job, it can feel uncomfortable or even embarrassing. This is why I recommend what I call the gradual transition approach. Instead of going from full-time employment to complete financial independence overnight, consider reducing your work commitment gradually as your passive income grows. Maybe you negotiate to work 4 days a week instead of 5, or to free, perhaps you transition or consulting work in your field, giving you more flexibility while still maintaining some active income. This approach has several advantages. It reduces the psychological shock of leaving traditional employment. It provides a safety net if your passive income projections don't work out exactly as planned, and it gives you time to adjust your spending and lifestyle gradually, rather than making dramatic changes all at once. The truth is, most people who successfully transition to living off passive income don't do it by accumulating a massive pile of money and then immediately quitting their jobs. They do it by building multiple income streams, their expenses reducing, and gradually shifting from active income to passive income over a period of years. This gradual approach also allows you to test different passive income strategies without risking your entire financial future on one method. You might discover that rental real estate isn't for you, but dividend investing feels comfortable and sustainable. Or maybe you find that creating digital products generates more income than you expected, while your stock portfolio underperforms your projections. The beautiful thing about building passive income is that it compounds in ways most people don't anticipate, not just financially, but psychologically and practically as well. When you have even a few $100s coming in passively each month, you start to see opportunities everywhere. You notice business ideas you might invest in. You pay attention to real estate deals that could generate cash flow. You become more aware of tax strategies that could help you keep more of your money. This heightened awareness often leads to accelerated wealth building. People who successfully create substantial passive income rarely do it through just one method. They typically combine several strategies, and each success makes the next one easier to achieve. The person who builds a successful rental property portfolio often also has a substantial investment account. The entrepreneur who creates passive income through digital products usually also understands how to invest in the stock market. Here's something that might surprise you about the psychology of passive income. The first dollar you earn passively feels completely different from the first dollar you earn from a job. There's something almost magical about money appearing in your account without you having to trade hours for it. This psychological shift is incredibly powerful because it changes how you think about money and work fundamentally. Once you experience real passive income, even small amounts, you start to question everything about traditional employment. Why are you selling your time by the hour when money can work around the clock? Why are you limiting your income to what one employer is willing to pay when you could potentially earn from multiple sources simultaneously? These questions lead to different decisions, which lead to different outcomes. But let's get practical about the timeline, because this is where most people either get excited or discouraged, depending on their current situation. If you're starting from zero and can consistently invest $500 per month, earning an average 8% annual return, you'll hit that first meaningful threshold of $100,000 in about 13 years. That might sound like forever, but consider that 13 years from now, you'll either have built this foundation or you'll still be wondering, what if? The timeline accelerates significantly if you can increase your monthly contributions. Invest $1,000 per month under the same conditions, and you'll reach $100,000 in about 7 years. Push that to $1,500 monthly, and you're looking at less than 5 years to hit your first major milestone. These timelines assume you're starting from scratch, but many people already have some savings or retirement accounts that give them a head start. What's really interesting is how the timeline changes once you hit those early milestones. The journey from 0 to 100,000 might take 7 years, but the journey from 100,000 to 200,000 typically takes less than 5 years with the same monthly contributions. This is compound interest starting to flex its muscles in a way that becomes increasingly noticeable. By the time you're working toward your third 100,000, the timeline shrinks even more. Your investments are now doing a significant portion of the heavy lifting, and your monthly contributions are adding fuel to an already substantial fire. This acceleration effect is why people who successfully build wealth often describe a moment when everything seemed to click and their progress became almost automatic. There's also the income replacement progression that most people don't fully appreciate. Let's say your current job pays $60,000 annually after taxes. You don't necessarily need to replace all $60,000 with passive income immediately. Maybe you start by replacing just $20,000 with passive income, then find a part-time job or consulting work $1,000. You that pays $40,000 effectively have created the same lifestyle with much more flexibility and security. As your passive income grows, you can gradually reduce your active work until eventually your passive income covers all your expenses. This progression makes the whole journey feel much more manageable and less intimidating than trying to replace your entire income in one dramatic leap. The key insight here is that financial independence isn't binary. You don't go from completely dependent on a job to completely free overnight. It's a spectrum, and every step along that spectrum gives you more options and more control over your life. Even having just $10,000 in passive income annually changes your relationship with your employer because you know you have other sources of money coming in. This brings us to what I call the confidence multiplier effect. When you have passive income, even modest amounts, you negotiate differently, you take risks differently, and you make career decisions differently. You're no longer desperate for any particular job because you know you have income that doesn't depend on any employer's goodwill. This confidence often leads to better job opportunities, higher salaries, and more interesting career paths, which in turn accelerates your journey toward complete financial independence. The timeline for building substantial passive income also depends heavily on your starting. Someone earning salary and expenses $100,000 annually with modest living expenses can obviously build passive income faster than someone earning $40,000 with high expenses. But here's something encouraging. The person with the lower income often develops better financial habits and more creative income generation strategies, which can serve them well in the long term. I've seen people with modest incomes build impressive passive income streams by being incredibly disciplined about their spending and creative about their income sources. They might house hack by renting out rooms, sell products online, or develop skills that allow them to freelance in their spare time. Every extra dollar gets funneled into investments or income-producing assets. The person earning six figures might have an easier time saving large amounts, but they often struggle with lifestyle inflation and assume they can solve their financial challenges simply by earning more money. Both approaches can work, but the mindset and habits matter more than the starting salary in most cases. What's crucial to understand is that building passive income is ultimately about creating systems that work without your constant attention. Whether that's a portfolio of dividend-paying stocks, a collection of rental properties, or a business that runs itself, the goal is the same. You want money coming in whether you're working, sleeping, or taking a month off to travel. These systems don't build themselves overnight, and they certainly don't maintain themselves without any effort whatsoever. But once they're established and running smoothly, they provide something that no job can offer: true location and time independence. The freedom to live where you want, work on what matters to you, and design your life according to your values rather than someone else's schedule. The most successful people I know who've achieved this kind of freedom didn't do it by following some cookie-cutter formula they found online. They did it by understanding their own situation, their own risk tolerance, and their own definition of what freedom actually means to them. Some people need $1 million to feel secure enough to quit their job. Others are comfortable making the leap with $300,000 and a willingness to live more simply. Your freedom number isn't just about mathematics. It's about psychology, lifestyle choices, and what you're willing to trade off to gain control over your time. The person who's perfectly happy living in a small apartment and cooking most of their meals at home needs far less passive income than someone who wants to maintain a lifestyle that includes expensive restaurants, luxury travel, and a large house payment. So there you have it. The actual numbers behind walking away from your job aren't as impossible as most people think. Whether it's that first $25,000 that proves passive income is real, or the $600,000 that finally replaces your salary, every milestone brings you closer to designing life on your own terms. The question isn't whether you can build this kind of freedom. The question is whether you'll start today or spend another year wondering what could have been.